When our parents left my younger brother and me alone, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, which would lead to some of the most exciting days of our life. My name is Emily, and I never imagined to find myself in such a scenario. My little brother Sam and I had an unshakable closeness growing up. He was 5 years younger than me and was always the one I cared, after protected from bullies and assisted with studies. But as time passed, life began to tug us in different directions. I went to college and eventually began working while Sam was still in high school, trying to figure out who he wanted to be. Our parents were constantly busy with demanding careers that left little time for family. They weren't inattentive but absent frequently, and as soon as I was old enough to drive and take on tasks at home, I took over much of the responsibility for Sam's care. It never felt like a duty. However, he was pleasant to be around, always, upbeat and ready to please. Taking care of him was not a chore. It was simply part of who we were. But everything changed after I moved out. By the time I was 23, I had moved into a modest apartment across town. I didn't spend as much time at home as I should have, and guilt gnawed at me every time I considered how much I was missing in Sam's life. The carefree little brother I used to know was gradually becoming someone I scarcely recognized, and the fact hurt more than I wanted to admit. One weekend, our parents stated that they would be away for a 3-day business trip, leaving Sam alone. My mother called, her voice full of concern. "Can you stick with him?" she asked. "He's old enough to handle things, but knowing you're there would make me feel better." I consented mainly out of remorse. It wasn't like I had anything big scheduled, and spending time with Sam would help bridge the distance between us. When I arrived, Sam greeted me at the door with his signature crooked smile. "Stranger, it has been a long time since we last met." He joked and drew me into a short hug. Yeah, I said, rolling my eyes while smiling. "Did you miss me?" He grinned and moved aside to let me enter. The house appeared exactly the same. Neat, but lived in with a slight aroma of lemon-scented cleanser. Walking inside seemed strangely unreal, like returning to my adolescent years. That first night, we spent hours catching up. Sam discussed school, his friends, and his college ambitions, while I provided details about my own life. It felt good, like old days, to close the gap that had formed between us over time. For a while, nothing seemed to have changed. But as the night progressed, I began to notice details about Sam that I had previously overlooked. He was no longer a small kid. He'd gotten taller, his shoulders broader, and his voice deeper. He exuded a serene confidence and maturity that I had not seen before, and this threw me off. I struggled to connect the youngster I once protected with the young man seated across from me. After supper, Sam recommended we watch a movie. He remarked something good as he flipped through the options on the television. "Not one of those dull dramas you enjoy." "Excuse me," I teased while seeming to be offended. "My choice in movies is impeccable." He smirked and finally chose a comedy that we had seen numerous times before. As the opening titles rolled, he sank onto the couch next me and stretched out his long legs. For a while, it was simple to forget about everything else and just live in the moment. We laughed at familiar jokes, recited lines we both knew by memory, and settled into a comfortable pace. But every now and then, I noticed Sam staring at me, not in an unusual or frightening manner, but with an intensity that made my tummy flutter. I dismissed it, telling myself I was simply overthinking things. After all, he is my brother. The way he looked at me was not odd. Was it there? When the movie ended, Sam stretched and yawned. "I'm going to get a drink," he remarked, standing up and walking for the kitchen. I stayed on the couch mindlessly, going through my phone. A few minutes later, his voice rang forth. "Hey, Emily, do you want anything?" "Sure," I responded. "Surprise me." When he returned, he was holding 2 cups of cola. He sat down again, this time a little closer, and handed me one, His knee brushed across mine, causing an odd thrill through me that I couldn't explain. "Thank you," I said, attempting to maintain my voice level. He shrugged and took a sip. "Not an issue." We sat in silence for a while, with only the faint hum of the television filling the room. I tried to focus on my phone, but his presence was strangely distracting. I could feel the warmth flowing from him, and the occasional touch of his knee against mine. It was nothing, I reminded myself. It's just proximity, but a small, restless part of me wasn't so certain. So Sam remarked abruptly, breaking the silence. "What is living like in the big city? Do you ever find yourself missing it here?" His question was casual, but the way his eyes fastened on mine made me pause. "I mean, yes, sometimes," I admitted while putting my phone down. "However, the situation has changed. I enjoy having my own space, you know." He nodded and leaned back against the couch. "I understand that. Still, it feels strange not having you around. The place seems quieter without you." I gave a slight smile. "I miss being here sometimes," I said. "But things change. People grow up." "Yes." He mumbled, his voice quieter and almost forlorn. "I suppose they do." Something about the way he said it caused my chest to constrict. As the night progressed, we kept conversing, laughing at old recollections and teasing each other about trivial things. The strange tension I had felt before gradually dissipated, replaced by a reassuring warmth that reminded me how much I missed this. I missed him. By the conclusion of the weekend, as I was driving home, I had come to a realization. Some bonds are too strong to be broken, no matter how far apart we are in life. Sam wasn't simply my younger brother. He was my anchor, the only constant in my existence. As I drove back to my apartment, I promised myself that I would not let so much time pass before seeing him again. I cast a fleeting glance at him, noting how buried in concentration he appeared. His forehead was slightly wrinkled, and he was wearing a serious expression that I had not seen before. It made him appear older and more mature, which unsettled me. For a brief moment, I saw him not just as my younger brother, but as his own person, complete with his own challenges and complexity. That knowledge threw me off, and I moved slightly to shatter the silence. "Well," I replied, keeping my tone, "Light, you'll be out of here soon enough. College, new friends, and an entirely different lifestyle." "Perhaps," he said with a shrug, "but it isn't the same. You've always been someone I could chat to, you know, even when times were terrible tough." I repeated, my brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He paused his attention, flitting to the floor before returning to me. "Just after Dad started working full-time and Mom grew so busy, I felt like I was mostly on my own. But you were always present. You made things easy." His words hit me hard, and shame washed over me in waves. I had no idea how much my absence had impacted him, how much he had relied on me without ever expressing. "So I apologized, Sam." I mumbled, "I didn't realize you felt that way." He shrugged again, but a faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "It is not your fault. You were dealing with your own issues, but I'm delighted you are here now." I agreed, reaching across to squeeze his shoulder. "And you know I am always available if you need me, right?" "Yeah," he said, his smile widening. "I understand." For a little period, everything seemed normal again, natural, easy. But when my hand rested on his shoulder, I became acutely aware of the tension in the air. When our eyes met something in his, expression softened, causing me to instinctively withdraw my hand. My cheeks warmed up and I hastily glanced away. "Anyway," I explained, clearing my throat, "we should probably sleep. It is becoming late." "Yeah," he agreed, stretching while standing. "A good idea." He moved toward the steps, pausing at the bottom to look back at me. "Good night, Emily." "Good night," I said. Trying a grin as he went upstairs, I gently exhaled, only to realize I'd been holding my breath. My thoughts were jumbled, and I couldn't shake the idea that something between us had changed, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I turned off the television and went into the kitchen to rinse my glass. The house was strangely quiet, with just the gentle hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. I stood by the window for a time, watching the silhouettes of trees sway in the moonlight, my mind racing with ideas I couldn't put together. When I eventually climbed into bed, I struggled to fall asleep. I stayed up for what seemed like hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the weird discomfort that had descended upon everything. Sam's words, his lingering stares, the way he addressed me. It all seemed significant, but I couldn't explain why. The next morning I awoke to the faint sound of music coming up from the kitchen. Sitting up groggily, I checked the time and was astonished to see how late it was. The sun had already risen to its highest point. I quickly put on some clothing and made my way downstairs, following the sound of music. Sam was in the kitchen humming along to a tune on the radio while preparing breakfast. He was dressed casually in a t-shirt and sweatpants with his hair unkempt from sleep. He reminded me of the small boy I used to tease and care for, but he also didn't. He was older and more confident, which caught me off guard. "Morning." He greeted me, looking up as I arrived. "I made eggs. Want some?" "Sure," I replied, seating down at the table. "Thanks." He set a dish in front of me and took a seat across from me. His easy smile made it difficult to keep focused on my thoughts. For a while, we ate in peaceful solitude, the warm sunlight spilling through the windows, creating a golden glow across the room. "This is good," Sam stated abruptly, breaking the silence. "Having you here makes it feel like old times." I agreed with a slight smile. It does. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. The previously seamless connection we had enjoyed had been replaced with something I couldn't quite explain. Something made my chest tighten and my mind race. I knew I couldn't ignore it no matter how hard I tried. The morning passed in a blur of minor tasks and routine, but the unsaid tension between us persisted. Sam appeared at ease, whistling along to the radio as he tidied up the kitchen while I occupied myself with whatever I could find. Anything to prevent my thoughts from wandering? Every look, every word between us felt heavier than before, but I couldn't explain why. By the time lunch arrived, I was agitated. Sam recommended watching another movie, but the idea of sitting motionless made me uncomfortable. "Why don't we take a walk?" I suggested, thinking that fresh air would help clear my mind. Sam grinned. "Sounds excellent. Let me get my sneakers." We went outdoors and walked through the calm neighborhood, which was surrounded with big trees and well-trimmed lawns. It was the type of setting where nothing seemed to change no matter how much time passed. We had a casual conversation side by side about his classes, my job, and the neighbor's overly excited dog. It felt natural again, like returning to a rhythm we hadn't discovered in years. Even while we laughed and talked, I couldn't help but notice the way his shoulder brushed against mine or how his glance lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself that was nothing but my mind running wild. But deep down, I couldn't avoid the reality. As we approached the park at the end of the street, the sight of the swings and the worn-down basketball court brought back childhood memories. Sam sat on one of the swings, his long legs practically brushing the ground, and signaled for me to join him. I hesitated briefly before lowering myself into the swing beside him, the metal chains creaking softly as I reclined back. "This place hasn't changed at all," he said, his voice tinted with nostalgia. "Yeah," I mumbled, allowing the memories to flood over me. The moment felt weighty, packed with unspoken words and a tension I couldn't quite describe. Smiling faintly, I continued, "It feels like we spent half of our childhood here." "That is because we did," he replied with a laugh. "You constantly insisted on pushing me on the swings even though I assured you I could do it myself." I smiled back. "Because you would always jump off and land in the mud." He chuckled and shook his head. Mom made you swear to keep me away from trouble. His laughing faded and his gaze shifted to the horizon, his expression becoming somber. You were constantly watching out for me. Of course, I responded nicely. You are my little brother. For a moment he said nothing. His expression was contemplative and his eyes narrowed slightly. Then, almost cautiously, he added, Do you ever consider how different things would have been if Dad had been present more? The question took me off guard. I looked at him unsure how to answer. After a little pause, I finally answered, I suppose. But you turned out pretty well, you know. You do not need his approval to feel proud of yourself. His stare met mine, and for a second, the raw vulnerability in his eyes made my chest hurt. Thank you, he whispered softly. This means a lot. We didn't speak for a bit after that, allowing the silence to settle in. The distant noises of the park filled the air. Rustling leaves, birds chattering, and a tiny squeak from the swings. It was serene, yet I could still feel the weight of his previous comments hovering between us. Sam eventually rose up, dusting his hands on his slacks. We should go back, he said. It's becoming colder. Yeah, I said, rising to my feet and falling in step with him. The walk home seemed longer than usual. The stillness between us was no longer comforting, but heavy with ideas that neither of us knew how to express. By the time we got to the house, I was eager to retreat to the guest room and clear my mind. But Sam had different ideas. Let's play a game, he suggested, taking a controller with a devilish grin. Tonight the loser washes the dishes. You're on, I said, happy for the distraction. For the next hour, we lost ourselves in the game with lively competitiveness and bursts of laughter, elevating our spirits. As usual, Sam won the most of the rounds, but I managed to steal a couple of victories, much to his dismay. By the end, the tension had subsided, at least for the time being. I am still not doing the dishes, I said, folding my arms in false disdain as we turned off the console. He laughed. Okay, I'll let you off the hook this time. The rest of the evening was unremarkable. We ate dinner, discussed our plans for the next day, and then went about our typical bedtime ritual. However, as the home became quieter and the night progressed, the weird vibe from before returned. Despite my best efforts to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving between us. Later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard a tiny squeak from the floors just outside my chamber. My pulse increased, and I paused, listening as the quiet footfall approached. Then a soft knock. Emily Sam's voice sounded uncertain. I sat up with my heart beating. Yeah, can I come inside? I hesitated, looking at the clock. It was late and the house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. What is wrong? I need to talk to you. He spoke barely above a whisper. I breathed softly and swung my legs over the side of the bed. Okay, come inside. The door creaked open and Sam walked inside his face, unreadable, as he shut it behind him. He leaned against it briefly before crossing the room and sat on the bed's edge. What's happening? I inquired, keeping my voice steady despite the anxious knot in my stomach. He did not answer right away, keeping his gaze locked on the floor and his shoulders tight. Finally, he admitted, I've been thinking a lot lately about us, regarding how much you mean to me. His remarks made my heart race, and I strained to maintain a neutral demeanor. Sam, you are my brother. I spoke cautiously. Of sure we mean a lot to one another. That is what family is. It is not simply that he mumbled barely, above a whisper. You've always been there for me like no one else has. You get me, Sam. I started, but he interrupted me. I don't want to make things awkward, he replied quickly. But I need you to understand how much you mean to me. I'm not sure what I would do without you. His words hung in the air, weighted with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. As our wordless tension reached its zenith, I stared at him. My thoughts jumbled. "Sam?" I eventually murmured, my voice gentle yet forceful. "I don't think you understand how difficult this is for me to hear." His expression faltered and his brows furrowed together. "I am not trying to make things tough," he remarked calmly. I needed to say it to let it out. I took a long breath and ran my hand through my hair, trying to calm my thoughts. "You mean a lot to me, too," I confessed cautiously. "But we are siblings, Sam. We have always looked out for one another because that is what a family does." His eyes clouded somewhat. "It's more than that," he answered, his voice wavering. "You know it is." I shook my head and my chest tightened. "You're just bewildered," I said. However, even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. "We've both been through a lot, especially with Mom and Dad, away so often. It's natural to feel close because of this." He argued that it wasn't confusion. His voice is now calmer. "This is how I feel. And I understand that this is not normal, but I can't pretend it isn't real." I stood up from my bed and began pacing about the little room, attempting to make sense of everything. My thoughts were jumbled, caught between the desire to reassure him and the overwhelming sense that something had gone horribly wrong. I turned to face him and spoke strongly. "Sam, we can't keep having this conversation. It is not fair to any of us." His expression wavered. A short expression of pain appeared on his face. He muttered, "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to let you know." The honest sincerity in his voice left me stunned. I took a slow breath and sat back down, my shoulders slumping under the weight of the situation. "I don't know how to answer," I confessed quietly. "You don't have to." He added, his voice strong. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. The room felt suffocating. The air was dense and difficult to breathe. The tension between us was almost terrible. I wished I could repair everything. I wanted to go back in time, to when things were easier, but I didn't know how. "We must find a way to move on," I eventually said. "You are my brother, Sam. That will never change." He nodded slowly, but the uncertainty in his eyes persisted. "I do not want to lose you." He confessed, "You are the only person who genuinely understands me. You aren't going to lose me." I comforted him, keeping my voice calm. "However, we need to establish boundaries. We can't keep obsessing on it." The silence that followed was oppressive, yet it felt essential. After a lengthy pause, Sam rose to his feet, moving carefully and slowly. "I apologize," he whispered. "I never intended to make you uncomfortable." "I understand," I responded gently, my tone kind. "I'm not furious at you, but we need to be cautious, Sam, for the both of us." He nodded once more and paused at the entrance. He stood there for a second as if confused whether to stay or leave. When he finally stepped out, the gentle click of the door closing behind him felt like a relief. Nevertheless, the tightness in my chest persisted. I sat there for what seemed like hours, staring at the empty space around me, trying to understand what had just happened. I couldn't articulate why, but I knew something between us had changed. Something was changing, and I felt it. The following morning was abnormally quiet. The entire house felt different, as if the atmosphere had changed overnight. Sam did not join me for breakfast, and I did not force him. I convinced myself that he, like me, needed some distance, and that things would return to normal in due course. But as the hours passed, the quiet between us became heavier, more difficult to ignore. By the afternoon, I had decided to break the ice. I discovered him in his room, seated on the side of his bed with headphones on. When he noticed me knocking, he took them off and gave me a faint, tentative smile. "Hello," I said, going inside. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged, lowering his attention to the floor. "I am fine," he mumbled. I sat down next to him, leaving just enough space between us to be comfortable. I admit that this is weird right now, but I don't want it to stay that way. We need to work this out. I don't want it to be like this, he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just not sure how to solve it. We'll sort it out, I told him with a tiny smile. It will take some time, but we'll get there. He looked at me, his expression softening. Thank you, he said earnestly, for not freaking out. I'm your sister. I stated simply, I will always have your back. For the first time in days, the tension appeared to ease, but only slightly. We kept talking, gradually transitioning to lighter themes, his classes, his buddies, and plans for the weekend. By the time I left his room, the weight on my chest had shifted slightly, but as the home became silent again that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't quite right. Sam's words, his feelings, and all that had happened in the previous several days lingered in my mind, making me nervous and apprehensive. No matter how much I tried to tell myself differently, I knew this wasn't over. That night, the home was quiet, but my thoughts was anything but. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Sam's remarks played again and over, his candor, his vulnerability, and the gravity of everything he had admitted. I kept telling myself that everything will return to normal, that this was simply a hard period that we would get over. But deep inside, I wasn't sure. Then about midnight, I heard faint footfall in the hallway. My chest constricted as they got closer, halting just outside my door. I sat up, held my breath, and waited. Then came a gentle, cautious knock. Just like the night before, Emily Sam's voice was barely audible. I took a steady breath and forced myself to remain calm. Yeah, I whispered. Can I come inside? My heart pounded. I hesitated, looking at the clock. It was late and the home was dark and quiet, but something in me wouldn't let me turn him down. Okay, I replied softly. Come inside. The door creaked open and Sam walked in. He appeared uneasy. His hands sank deep into his pockets. His shoulders hunched slightly. He paused for a while before closing the door behind him, resting against it briefly, before moving over to sit on the edge of my bed. I apologize, he murmured. I realize I shouldn't be here. It's fine, I said quickly, despite my beating pulse. What is on your mind? He paused again, his eyes fixated on the floor. I've been thinking about what I said earlier, and I'm worried I fouled things up. You didn't, I stated firmly, leaning forward. Sam, I told you we'd figure it out, but it will take time, I know, he said, his voice wavering. But it's hard. I'm stuck in my own head and don't know how to get out. I reached out and gently squeezed his shoulder. You are not alone, I told him quietly. We will go through this together. He looked up, his gaze catching mine. The intensity in his gaze caused a peculiar constriction in my chest. You have always been there for me, he replied, his voice full of emotion, especially when no one else was. I'm not sure what I would do without you. You don't have to think about it, I said, keeping my voice calm. I am not going anywhere. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The stillness between us felt thick, heavy with sentiments none of us could express. Sam's expression was raw and vulnerable, which I had never seen before. It left me at a loss of words. I just want everything to be fine again, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I do not want to lose you. You won't, I assured, though my voice faltered now. But Sam, we need to set boundaries. We cannot let this take over. He nodded slowly with a disturbed expression. He said, I know I am trying. I know you are, I responded, softly, and that is what matters. The tension in the room altered, not dissipating, but becoming less stifling. Sam did not move to depart as I had expected. Instead, he remained motionless, his stare fixed on mine as if looking for something. He couldn't quite pinpoint. The air between us felt electric, and every breath was accentuated by the silence. After a moment, I spoke calmly but firmly. "Sam, we can't keep going in circles like this. It's unhealthy for both of us." "I know," he said just above a whisper, "but I'm not sure how to get past it." "Let it go." His candor caught me off guard, and I found myself leaning in slightly, as if narrowing the distance between us would cross the emotional gap as well. Perhaps I suggested thoughtfully, "You have to face it head on." He frowned, a hint of perplexity on his face. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, my heart beating, as I looked for the appropriate words. Sometimes I spoke slowly. The only way to forward is to quit avoiding it. To tackle it fully, his gaze lingered on me. His brow wrinkled as he processed what I said. "What are you saying?" He trailed off, uncertain. "I'm saying I softly interrupted that perhaps keeping everything inside isn't helpful. You must allow yourself to feel it deeply before you can fully go on." His expression revealed a spark of comprehension. "Emily, it's okay," I reassured him quietly, laying my palm over his. "This is only a moment, nothing more." Initially, he remained still. His stare fixed on me, the gravity of the situation pushing down on both of us. He then leaned in hesitantly. Our lips met with the softest brush, uncertain, brief, but full of emotions neither of us could put into words. It ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving a heavy silence that seemed oppressive. Sam drew back his look. "A mix of shock and concern? I apologize." He stammered, his voice unsteady. "I did not mean no, Sam." I cut him off, keeping my voice calm. "Do not apologize." He met my stare and looked for something in my expression. A faint smile appeared on my lips as I mumbled, "Damn, I have a pretty handsome brother." I astonished myself by saying that. He paused for a second. He leaned in again without saying anything else. This time the kiss was deeper and more certain, as if we were both pushing the boundaries we had just crossed. We halted briefly before I moved my hand elsewhere, pushing us beyond the line we had already crossed. His eyes widened, echoing my disbelief, yet neither of us backed away. We both let it happen without saying anything, and it went well beyond what either of us could have expected. What we did was reckless, and I had to admit it. But in that moment, it felt perfect. It felt fantastic. When everything settled down, we both laid there completely aware of what had just happened. "Wow," Sam breathed, shattering the silence. "I honestly don't know what to think." "It's all right," I replied, hastily cutting him off. "It's finished, and we can move on." He steadied me, his eyes loaded with unspoken queries that he did not utter. He rose slowly, his actions deliberate, as if fearful of shattering our fragile understanding. "Good night, Emily," he whispered quietly. "Good night," I said, seeing him walk out of the room. When the door clicked shut behind him, I let out a nervous breath, my mind racing. The moment was fleeting, yet it altered everything. A line had been crossed, which may help us find clarity or muddle matters even further. I had no idea what the future contained, but for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could get through it together. The next morning, something in the house felt different and lighter. Sam joined me for breakfast, his demeanor more relaxed than it had been in days. We casually discussed our plans, the discussion flowing smoothly and unforced. It felt like a step forward, and I held on to that hope as the hours passed. When it was finally time for me to depart, Sam led me to the door. Josh hadn't returned home yet, which was a comfort. I had to handle this alone. "Thank you for staying." Sam murmured, his grin, gentle but genuine. It meant a lot. "I'm glad I did," I responded. "I will come back soon, okay? We'll keep chatting and work this out." He nodded with a hopeful face. "Yes, we will." As I drove away, the house faded in my rearview mirror, but the weight of everything that had happened remained with me. I knew the days ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were making progress, and that was enough for now. Back in my apartment, life resumed its typical pace. However, no matter how hard I tried to forget about that night, the recollection stayed. I found myself thinking about Sam more than I cared to admit, wondering how he was coping and if he had gotten the clarity he needed. A few weeks later, my phone vibrated with a text from him. "Hello, I just wanted to say thank you again. Things seem clearer now. I am doing okay." I glanced at the message for a long time before answering. "I'm happy. Simply take one step at a time." "Okay. I am always there if you need me." He responded fast. "I know I will be okay." It wasn't precisely a closure, but it was progress, and that was enough for now. Still, I find myself doubting everything. I wonder what others think. Was it wrong? Was it anything I should regret? Should I feel guilty? I do not know. Please share your opinions in the comments. It would mean a lot. Thank you.